Elon Musk made one of the most, if not the most, effective statements in this so-called culture war. He suggested you cancel Netflix. He made this comment in response to a Libs of TikTok post, which showed the obvious. Netflix highlighting in their inclusion and diversity report, where they basically celebrated not hiring so-called white people, and instead celebrating the percentage of racially underrepresented directors and lead actors being placed on the platform. Now, for the people who claim to care about Jeffrey Epstein, they should have been boycotting Netflix over 5 years ago now, because back in 2020, as you know, the softcore child porn known as CUTIES was released on the platform, where it literally focused on pre-adolescent girls gyrating, sexually presenting themselves on a movie. And some of the scenes included adult males. Now, this was a movie that was created and released, or I should say, it was created in Europe. Obviously, it was released globally, specifically France. And as we know, Europe, just as a continent and in general, have been openly supporting pedophilia. I mean, it's the place where people like Roman Polanski feel safe when they're not even safe in America, which is, very libtarded, as we know. But Europe takes it to a different level. And outside of opening the gates for the third world, Europe have opened the gates for pedophiles, decades ago. Some could say centuries. It's the reason why Hollywood has always talked about the greatness of Europe's sexual, openness and liberalism. Because I remember hearing many times before how people would criticize, American movies, they allow all of this violence, but they're such prudes when it comes to portraying sex. Meanwhile, in Europe, they'll show everything. Yeah, they'll show everything, including pre-adolescent and young teen breast. Yes, they'll show that and have shown that in European movies. And, it's always obviously been a retarded argument, because the fact of the matter is the violence being portrayed in any movie and television show, unless there's an Alec Baldwin mistake, allegedly mistake. But yeah, the violence isn't real. The people, no matter how grotesque the scenes look, they're not actually being cut and sawed in half or shot or beaten. But when you have nudity, when you have sex scenes, even if the bodies are stunt doubles for certain nude scenes or sex scenes, it's still actual, real nudity and physicality that's occurring. And in this movie, Cuties, they had that with 11-year-old girls, pre-adolescent girls. And you have to remember, hundreds of little girls auditioned to be one of the 4 girls represented in this movie. So somewhere on the dark web, we have hundreds of little pre-adolescent girls gyrating sexually. That's just out there in someone's possession. And again, I bring all that up to say Netflix should have been dead in the water when not only they made it, but then defended it. But, it was diverse, so that makes it especially okay. It had some African woman director and writer. Obviously, the producers behind it were some pale-skinned individuals, European white men, maybe some of them masquerading as white and they're actually Jews. But this is the reality of not just Netflix, but this has been the reality of Hollywood in general. And you had some notable YouTubers, the libtarded ones, defending it as well, which, of course, you shouldn't be surprised. And the reason why I say this was significant because out of all of the talk that we have about so-called culture war and calling out the double standards, the main thing that never seems to get done is communicating the fact that you can weaponize your wallet and put an end to most of this garbage. Because if your money's not there, then they have nothing. And if you just had the people who claim to be anti-woke, who claim not to be libtarded, permanently boycott not just Netflix, but Hollywood in general, then I believe in a few years' time, they would cease to exist. Because then viable alternatives would form. And people would send their money to that, the viable alternative that isn't libtarded, that isn't trying to normalize pedophilia and promote racial discrimination. Basically anti-white racism. But yeah, I mean, this isn't breaking news. Netflix, with their inclusion and diversity report, celebrating discriminating against whites. And, hell, there's millions of whites in the United States and in Europe that are fully on board their own discrimination. And my thoughts are, they should, if they're so down with the agenda, they should do us all a favor and put an end to it all. Since they want less white people so much, or they agree with that, then do themselves and the rest of us a favor. And then maybe the less cucked whites, or the whites that aren't cucked at all, can do better for themselves and for society in general. Because this inclusion and diversity nonsense doesn't just affect, so-called white people. It affects us all, especially from an entertainment standpoint, because everything on Netflix specifically has been diversity-filled trash. When they're not, pumping out pedo stuff like Cuties. But anyway, Netflix is not getting exposed. It's just further getting highlighted for what it's been on. I mean, if anything, the ADL got exposed recently with them labeling Turning Point USA as a hate group and everything that's positive about being white as bigotry. So it just goes to show you, the two ends of the agenda, from the entertainment side to the political side. And that's why when people call out the whole, Israel thing, or have some mild criticism of Jews, they never really call out what counts. Because in reality, the blame Jew narrative that comes from the left is really just a deflective narrative to keep away from the POCs that should be focused on. Meanwhile, those very same people will still support Hollywood, which is ran by those same sons and daughters of Israel. So it's just full of garbage anyway when they go there. But yeah, the members of the ADL, which was started off of, funny enough, protecting a sexual predator, like Hollywood is. But that's the basis of their origins. And so it makes sense that they're in lockstep with Hollywood and the entertainment industry, promoting anti-white and pedophilia agendas. Now we'll see if people follow Elon Musk's suggestion, not just when it comes to Netflix, but Hollywood in general, which is a thing they should have been doing over a decade ago now, especially if you're a MAGA hat voter. But anyway, that's all I got to say about this.